Okay, so let's say I'm an official in Maritime province, and I could really go either way, on the side of justice or on the side of Chinese money. How much from that Chinese slush fund could I get for switching sides?
It depends on what you can deliver. It's highly transactional. So they bought the parliament with half plus one votes. So if they had 17 votes. So if you're one of those first 16 who were bought off beforehand, you'll get what you're going to get, whatever you had arranged. And as you know, they buy you, but then they've got stuff on you. If you've gone to China and you've done whatever, they might have the tape, they might have all sorts of other
stuff. Oh, the honey traps and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't like honey, maple syrup traps, whatever it's
going to be. No, that wouldn't work. Sorry, Cleo.
That would be a sticky situation.
Oh, that was much better. But you've seen the numbers, right, for some of these bribes. Give us a range of how much these bribes can be.
They can be in the millions. If it's kind of leadership level, yeah. Otherwise, but we've also seen really small amounts in the Marshall Islands, where which recognizes Taiwan, and there was an attempt to set up a special economic zone, country within a country type thing. There was an indictment against the two Chinese involved in New York, and so it's a longer story, but an interesting one.
Well, we'll get back to that, but just in terms of the numbers.
Yeah, so some of those amounts are like $7,000, $22,000. It can be quite small, but it can also be really big. And Solomon's is a very high value acquisition for Beijing. It's an important location. It's the site of the Battle of Guadalcanal just over 80 years ago. Iron Bottom Sound, Tulagi, and the reason that the Japanese attacked there first was the British had set up there. Tulagi was the head of the British setup for running the region. Very good geography, critical geography. So then the Japanese took it, and then the Americans took it back. If you want to blow a hole in Western defenses, you've jumped the first and the second island chain, and you're interdicting Australia.
So you're saying that the Solomon Islands is a really important strategic place to basically fight a war from, to station your naval vessels and air force, that sort of thing.
Yeah, offensive or defensive. So, if you've got, and it's not, if you look at where Wang Yi visited, if you look at this map, and you've got the map of where Wang Yi visited during May and June of 2022, you can see he visited the range of countries that go off the coast of Australia and New Zealand. And if you're using the maritime militia and the fishing fleet, you get into a position and you're dropping buoys and you're doing all this other stuff. You're getting into a position where it makes it very hard for Australia or New Zealand to join the fight. You've got a gun to their head right off the coast. So, it's not just about attacking Australia or New Zealand in this case. It's about making Australia or New Zealand not willing to fight because the cost is going to be very high, even if they can break past that island chain.
If, for instance, there was a Chinese invasion of Taiwan.
Yeah, functionally, China is setting up its own island chain off the coast of Australia and New Zealand.
So I remember last year there was some talk about a sort of relationship between China and the Solomon Islands, where they were going to maybe allow some Chinese ships to dock there. But Sogavare promised that absolutely definitely the Chinese People's Liberation Army would absolutely never set up a naval base there. So, we should believe him, right?
Yeah, sure. This is a guy who bought off 39 of his 50 members of parliament, enough to change the Constitution, and then amended the Constitution to postpone elections. There's supposed to be elections in 2023, which he'll lose. He's now postponed those elections to an indefinite date. It's supposed to be next year, but we'll see. Because he wants to host the Pacific Games instead.
Well, But the Pacific Games will bring glory to his leadership. So isn't that more important?
Yeah, and what it also does is it gives him an excuse to crack down on any protesters or demonstrators that might disrupt those games. Does this sound familiar to countries that host games like that?
Well, I mean, like you were saying, this is a great case study, and it really does show how the Chinese Communist Party can very successfully essentially blow up a democracy from the inside. They get their guy in the top, spread some bribe money around, train some police, and suddenly you have politicians who have a, counter narrative. They get purged. Protesters become at risk. It is stunning to see this happen. And the fact
and over the course of just 4 years.
Yeah, it's very fast. I was thinking when you were talking about the police thing that it reminded me a lot of Hong Kong, the difference between Hong Kong police in 2014 and 2019. But it took them years to kind of replace and retrain the police force to be more brutal toward protesters and things like that. But, in this case, the last time there were protests were like 2021, right? So this is... Or like if you're talking about the vote of no confidence, then was that a year ago? So like in a year, they managed to
completely swap out
what they did to Hong Kong police in 5 years.
Yeah, they're getting better at it, and it's it's difficult to underestimate how important it is. And we've focused on what the Chinese have done, but one of the reasons that it's been so quick and so effective is there's been zero pushback. They're doing it in a vacuum.
So you're saying that embassy the U.S. built this month, it might be a little too late?
So the Australians have been, in a Five Eyes context, the Australians have been taking the lead on this. And they have consistently said, and there are a lot of good Australians who are serious about it, not to denigrate them, but the people that seem to be making the policy have consistently said, we've got this under control, don't worry about it, you've got other things to do. So the problem has been, if anything, State Department trusting an ally, which is something that normally should work. But in this case, it really hasn't. And how do you think, Suidani and his team feel when they hear about the Australians trying to cut a new trade deal with China?
Or giving arms to these policemen.
Yeah, well, there's that too. But, they can kind of pretend to justify that somehow. But if at the same time you've got an Australian government that is clearly trying to, quote unquote, patch things up with China, how much are they going to help the people who are standing up to China in the region?
Well, clearly not very much.
No, and they have, and it's just currently, this isn't theoretical. One of the biggest problems in the Pacific Islands is overfishing or illegal fishing, illegal, unregulated, imported fishing. And it's a main source of revenue for a lot of countries in the region. But what's been happening is it's very hard to patrol. The U.S. has tried to step up, especially through the Coast Guard. It has a thing called a ship rider agreement where you can take somebody from a local country and they come on the ship and you can help patrol and interdict in the region. But just to give you an idea of how vast it is, just the North Pacific countries, the freely associated states, are about the size of the continental U.S. And there are approximately, including the Coast Guard and local vessels, maybe 9 or 10 boats that can do it, cutters. That's like patrolling the U.S. with 10 police cars that go 15 miles an hour. So already there's a problem. But you have those cutters that are in the southern part now, and Solomon Islands blocked the U.S. cutter from coming in, U.S. Coast Guard cutter from coming in and refueling in Solomon. And said, oh, it's bureaucratic or whatever, but they have not redressed the situation. They haven't fixed the situation. And in January, Vanuatu also didn't return calls, and a Coast Guard cutter could not come in and pick up the shipwright. So at this very moment, there are two countries that are not actively working with the U.S. on what they say is their primary security concern around economic issues, which is illegal fisheries. And one can only think that the only country that benefits from that is China, because of the illegal fisheries that it does, and also because it takes those patrol vessels out so they can't monitor all of the other activity the Chinese are doing. So it has real on the ground implications for ability to protect the economic security of the region and just to operate in the region. It's already happening.